I think it's safe to say that the F40 generation BMW 1 Series arrived on the market to a pretty lukewarm critical reception. Now, that's not because it was a bad car per se. It's got a really nice interior that feels well built and it looks pretty good outside if you like this kind of design, but it just doesn't have the involvement of the old rear-wheel drive car that it replaced. Now, that goes for the 118i and the range-topping M135i xDrive, but now BMW has added this 128 Ti to the range. It's a sporty little hot hatchback, so can it change our opinion on the 1 Series? That's what we're going to find out in today's video. Now the 128 Ti is a bit of an interesting one because on the surface it could be seen as a bit of a rush job, a bit of a parts bin special. It borrows the B48 2-litre turbocharged engine from the 135i. It also takes that car's front Torsen limited slip differential and anti-roll bar setup, but this has a bespoke tune of the springs and dampers, so it should be a little bit more involving in theory. It's also 80 kilograms lighter than that all-wheel drive car, and at its price point, it's $2,500 more expensive only than a Volkswagen Mark 8 Golf GTI. So while you might think this goes head to head with a Mercedes-Benz A250 or an Audi A3 40 TFSI, really it's a rival for Volkswagen's original hot hatch. So has BMW pulled it off? Have they turned around their front drive nous with this 128 Ti? That's exactly what we're going to be examining in this video. And of course, if you have any opinions on the 128 Ti, let me know in the comment section down below. And if you haven't done so already, we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe. So how do we tell apart the 128 Ti from the rest of the range? Well, in mineral grey, it's pretty easy to do so. You've got these red strakes at the front, red brake calipers, and red side skirts, all of which make this car look really good, I reckon. I'm not the biggest fan of the front end of the 1 Series. I think it looks a bit like a quokka that's a bit upset with you, but the extra addenda on this vehicle makes it look pretty good. Now onto that TI badge as well, because while there are a flurry of M badges on this vehicle, the TI Turismo Internazionale badge is really what we're interested in here, because while it's a storied badge that's been through BMW's heritage on sports cars and coupes in the 60s, it's now on an affordable hot hatch. And for me, Ti means 3 Series Ti, the 318 Ti Compact from the 1990s and then the 25 Ti Compact from the noughties. That's my experience of Ti, which is the affordable side of the M badge, if you like. It's kind of a slightly performance edge to an affordable BMW, and that's exactly what this car is. It's a Golf GTI rival, and yeah, I can't wait to take it for a spin. But yeah, let me know what you think of it in the comment section down below, how it looks, and of course, if you've seen enough of this video already and you want to check out more about this 128 Ti, make sure you click on the link I've dropped in the comment section below, where you can organise a test drive or check out the brochure or read the written review of this car on our site. So around the rear is, I think, probably the most successful angle of the 1 Series. I don't love it from the front, but the 128 Ti gets this little spoiler. You also get the Ti badging, a little bit of red flourish going on as well, but it maintains its sort of classy look back here. It doesn't look too boy racer. So let's pop this manually operated tailgate, where we find 380 litres of boot space. Now, there's no surprises there because it feels like it's very benchmarked on the GTI, which has 1 more litre of boot space than this car. As for features in here, you get a little bit of extra storage under the boot floor, but you don't get a spare tyre in this 128 Ti, unfortunately, and the boot isn't that well finished. The carpet feels a little bit cheap, and there's a couple of hooks off to the side and spaces to store stuff, but ultimately it is not a class-leading boot, but that's kind of not what this car's about. It's about being fun to drive, so hopefully we'll get to find that out soon. So the BMW 128 Ti. Now, this might be one of the most distinguished BMW interiors from the basic car. Now, even M cars like M3s and M4s don't really have all of the badging and the red stitching that this 128 Ti has. I know there are some exceptions, like the optional seats in the bigger M cars that have the holes through them and that sort of thing. But they've done a really good job of making this feel not like a normal 1 Series. With all this red stitching, you've got this red cloth-scented Sensatec seat with leather bolsters. Feels really nice, super comfortable as well. This little Ti red insignia here, which is, yeah, I don't know, you might find it tacky, you might find it tasteful. That's going to be up to personal preference. But yeah, they've done well to differentiate it. And it's, although there are M badges, as I mentioned outside, it has its own theme going on, and I like it. And I'd quite like to see more of it from BMW, to be honest. So yeah, more Ti products, bring them along. Now, what about the actual suite in here? The technology suite and all of that sort of thing. So 10.25-inch touchscreens, pretty standard for a BMW. Now, this car's based on the UKL2 platform, not the cluster architecture that all the bigger cars like the 3, the 4, the 5 Series, etc. are based on. So there are a couple of differences, mainly this lower transmission tunnel. Being a front-wheel drive car, you don't have that same sort of big in-your-face dash panel. You've just got this slightly more airy design, which is, you know, kind of interesting, kind of nice. You get a bit more space for storage, and you would normally get a wireless charging pad here, but in the world that we live in, where there's semiconductor shortages, that's the first thing to go, unfortunately. The second thing to go, apparently, is the head-up display. So yeah, be very careful when you're buying a car at the moment. If you're expecting to get stuff like wireless charging, just really check with your dealer and the build sheet to make sure you're not getting stiffed. But back to the 128 Ti, we've got a 12.3-inch digital driver's display in front of me, which suffers the same fate as pretty much all of BMW's displays, which is that it doesn't have the interactivity and the wow factor that versions from Mercedes and Audi do have. So again, something we really want to see BMW address in the future. But what about the build quality? Well, this thing feels typically Germanically well put together. There's no creaks and rattles in the front seat. The steering wheel feels really nice and solid. All the materials are plasticky, but they are pleasant. They're not cheap plasticky. Like, this is soft touch up here, soft touch down here, and fairly soft padding down with this leatherette here. And that brings me on to the seats, which I mentioned briefly before, but they are fully electrically adjustable. Not like some hot hatches in this slightly below this segment, which get manual seats. Here we get full electric adjust with 2-position memory for the driver. I also get inflatable bolsters and lumbar support. So that just means I can adopt a really nice low set driving position. Now, much like the digital driver's display, there is one last issue that I'm having with all modern BMWs, and that is the thickness of the steering wheel. It's bothering me less and less every day, and the full fat M-car wheels are absurd, and it's making this feel a little bit more normal, but you know, I still think it's more the squishiness that takes away that little bit of extra feel when you're out on the road that I would like to see gone. But anyway, clearly it's working for them because they seem to be selling pretty well. Certainly in this 1 Series, it's doing rather well in the Australian sales charts. And I think this 128 Ti is only going to bolster it because I mentioned at the top, it feels special enough and different enough to the normal 1 Series without being a full fat M car. It really does give you a different vibe to the usual BMW, and I think that's kind of cool. Now, as you're probably aware, the previous generation 1 Series was always hamstrung in the backseat by its rear-wheel drive layout, and the front-wheel drive car seems to have addressed this pretty well, though it's still not as spacious as some rivals. It does offer plenty more room than it did before. So at 6'2", behind my driving position, I've actually got a decent amount of knee room and a decent amount of toe room as well. Now, headroom is at a premium, but yeah, I can fit. So if you're shorter than me, you should be sweet back here. Also, you've got a lovely panoramic sunroof here. It opens as well, and that's part of the enhancement package fitted to this specific car. But apart from that, it's all pretty standard back here. So you've got the same Sensatec cloth with a little bit of leather. Now, I should add the middle seat is more usable than it was before, though if you're over sort of 5'10", I reckon you'll struggle to be there comfortably. And there is still a transmission tunnel, but yeah, it is more usable than before. But there are some great practical touches, like air vents back here, as you'd expect, 2 USB-C fast charging ports, and the ability to fit a 1.5 litre bottle in the rear door card, the same as the front door cards. So if you need to carry your family, you'll be able to keep the people in the back hydrated. I reckon that's pretty cool. You've also got soft touch materials, just like the front, with a decent little armrest. And yeah, the back seat's pretty spacious, decent view out over the front headrest. And although we don't have a flip down center armrest, you do get these snazzy little seat belts with a little M logo to make you a little bit happier. The ADR combined fuel consumption figure for the 128 Ti is 6.8 litres per 100 kilometres, 0.2 better than a Golf GTI. As for servicing, the 128 Ti will prompt you when it's time to visit a dealer, and for a basic service package for 5 years or 80,000 Ks, it's going to cost you $1,650. But you can pay a little bit more to cover brake rotors and wipers, but the cost is then nearly double what it is for the basic package. So if it's worth it, let me know down below what you reckon. Now on to insurance. The medium budget direct customer over the past 12 months paid $1,164 to comprehensively insure their new BMW 1 Series. Now your premium will vary based on things that insurers take into account, such as your driving history, where you live, and whether or not you garage the car. So on paper, this BMW 128 Ti has pretty much everything it needs to take down the Golf GTI. Of course, we'll have to test it out in a proper comparison soon, but what do I feel out here on the road? Well, for a start, the 2-litre turbocharged B48, codenamed 4-cylinder engine, is a real sweetie. It's just a good engine. BMW know how to do this sort of stuff. It's got really decent mid-range punch, and its 380 Newton meters of torque is available from 1,350 all the way up to 4,000 RPM, and that really gives an idea of the character of this engine. It loves being in that mid-range, and yes, it will rev out to its roughly sort of 6,500 RPM red line, and it will hold the gear if you decide not to change in manual mode, as I am now on the shifter, which is good. I like that. But yeah, it's definitely happiest in its mid-range, and there it makes good grunt. It really is a match for the Golf's engine. The EA888 is, they feel characterfully quite similar. This has a almost more gravelly tone to it, and obviously BMW's got some synthesized sound things going on for it to sound like that. But yeah, overall the effect is successful, and thankfully there's a pretty slick feeling Aisin 8-speed torque converter automatic here. It's not the ZF that the cluster architecture rear drive cars get, but they've definitely worked on the tuning. Since I first drove it in the M135i, it feels pretty quick to shift. It's not quite as snicky as the ZF 8-speed, and it's not quite as tack sharp as a Hyundai's DCT or something like that, but yeah, it works, and the paddles obey manual commands, and when you leave it in sport mode you almost don't need to use manual, which is great. It's hooked up to the front wheels as well by a Torsen type limited slip differential, but it is only mechanical. It doesn't have an electronically controlled program like you'd find in a Hyundai i30N, so it doesn't have the ability to sort of overdrive the wheel to give that crazy front end bite that you get from that Hyundai, but it does work really well to pull this car out of corners. I think you'll be surprised at the lack of understeer from mid-corner onwards. It really does dig in and pull the nose straight towards the apex, and it's pretty enjoyable, to be honest. The chassis is good. There's plenty of grip available from these Pirelli P0 tyres, and the envelope of operation of them is great. The steering feel, though, is a little bit woolly. It's definitely artificial, and I think the big fat steering wheel definitely contributes to that, but hey ho, that's what they're doing, that's what we get. But it is a sharp-ish steering rack. It doesn't feel overly alert like a Fiesta ST's steering. It just feels natural, and it really is a car that anyone can get in and drive pretty quickly. It's a very safe car. But what that safety means is that perhaps it doesn't have the dynamic breadth of ability that I think the Golf GTI has. Now, it does turn in pretty sharply and hold on with the nose really well, but you just can't quite lean on that front end enough to get the rear to smear around in that joyous front-wheel drive way that you get in a GTI and cars like old French hatchbacks, for example. And so instead of a absolute lunatic on an open road like this, you get a calm yet very capable vehicle that maybe doesn't elicit such huge smiles like an old school hot hatch, but is tame enough and really good. And honestly, I think some of this could be fixed with simply a sticky set of tires. Like a really nice front end can come just from swapping the tires out. So I'd love to drive this car not on these Pirellis, but rather on something more aggressive like a Michelin Pilot Sport 4S or similar, with a little bit more bite, a little bit more sidewall feel, because these Pirellis are OEM for BMW. They're very different from the tires that you're going to find on a Hyundai i30N. So yeah, horses for courses. They each want their tires to do different things. So just because it's got the same name doesn't mean it's the same tire. But the star of the show of this little 1 Series, in my book, is the ride, because they've really done a great job in making this car such a resolved vehicle out here on this really testing Australian back road as we're driving down, as the light is fading very quickly. It is so confidence inspiring, this thing. You just don't have to worry about mid-corner bumps. The body control is fantastic, and yet it doesn't have any trade-offs that I can feel, or at least that I've noticed in my testing, with comfort for a hot hatch. Now, it's not as supple and smooth and comfortable as a base model hatch you would expect, like a base model Golf Life or something like that. It always has that little bit of sort of hoppiness, just that communication, the thing that lets you know that this TI model isn't just a run-of-the-mill BMW. It's something a little bit more special, a little bit sportier, and that's there all the time, even when you're driving around the freeway and around town. But it's not like a harshness, it's just this beautiful elastic rounded edge. You can feel the dampers sucking the springs back down in their rebound phase, and it's actually really beguiling. Now, Apart from the fantastic damping, I do have to mention this car's slightly lackluster safety suite. Now, it did get 5 stars when it was tested in 2019. However, this UKL2 platform is getting on in years, and it means it doesn't have things like reverse or junction AEB, and it also doesn't have a highway travel assist function, so not like a full-on lane trace assist that you would get in a vehicle in the up-spec cluster architecture. So, something like a 330i or a 340i, you don't get that professional driving assistant. But the systems that are here are very well integrated, and BMW has this great thing where you've got an extra little button here where you can configure an individual setting so that you can just hop in the car and get the safety systems that you want. And finally, to refinement. As I mentioned at the start, you can hear that little 4-cylinder grumbling away a lot of the time, but it's not an unpleasant noise. It feels like it's meant to be there. Now, it is a little bit louder than a larger BMW, such as a 3 Series, but compared to its peers, especially like the Hyundai i30N, this thing is really easy and quiet to live with every day. It's about on par, if not slightly better, than a Volkswagen Golf GTI, just from my calibrated ear test. So yeah, the 128 Ti is definitely not an all-out track-tearing monster. Instead, it has this character of being just really competent, really comfortable and controlled out here on the road, and you can sink your teeth into this car and enjoy the handling characteristics, but it doesn't have that ultimate grip and sharpness of some hot hatches. But I think for what BMW is intended to do, which make basically a small, fast luxury car, this is a really convincing effort. So, what do I think of the 128 Ti? Is this the best 1 Series on sale right now? Well, for my money, it is. I love a hot hatch like this, and I think the extra 80 kilogram weight savings and the retuned suspension from the M135i really makes this car ride sweetly and drive very nicely indeed out on the road. The track might be a different story, but that's what a Hyundai i30N's for at this price point. Of course, I'd love to hear your comments down below, and also while you're down there leaving your opinions, we'd also love it if you could hit subscribe if you haven't done so already. And as always, thank you for watching Chasing Cars.